Hello again. Now we will be continuing with Elena's presentation. She will be talking about infant curiosity and more specifically how infants choose what to explore next. And she will be sharing her study plan with us, which investigates the role of infant curiosity in solving the exploration and exploitation dilemma. I will just leave the stage to her. If you have any questions, please post it on the chat and we will be answering these questions at the end. Thank you.
Okay, then I'll take over. Thank you very much, Dida. I hope you can hear me and see my slides well. So then a short introduction of myself. As many of you may not know me, my name is Elena. I'm a first-year PhD candidate under the supervision of Gerd Westermann and Marina Bajdai, and I will present, as Dida already said, my study plan about investigating how infants choose what they want to explore next. So infants still have the whole world to explore and learn about, and that they do explore to acquire knowledge and new skills is crucial for their overall development. Curiosity is seen here as the intrinsic driving force motivating such exploratory behavior. From experimental looking preference studies, it seems that infants are most attending towards what is intermediately familiar. So not too familiar, but also not completely unknown. However, we still do not actually know much about the underlying mechanisms of how infants actively choose what they want to explore and learn about. So in my project, we wanted to focus on the infant's active involvement in their curious exploration. And this led me to a perspective which has not yet been addressed in infant research, the exploration-exploitation dilemma. So we phrased the dilemma here as following. So the dilemma states that you need to exploit a more specific aspect in your environment to effectively acquire all the available and relevant knowledge about that aspect. But you also need to explore the world to stumble across and exploit various information sources, because only knowing all there is to know about this one rattle a child has would not allow them to actually have a good understanding of the world they live in. So when or under which circumstances a switch occurs or should occur for optimal learning is a crucial question to investigate, we thought. So my study project currently aims to do this with a gaze contingent eye tracking task that I will describe in a little bit. Based on this, some of our central research questions are as follows. Do infants actually explore systematically? That could lead to us finding comparable exploration patterns across participants and even age groups. However, we also think that we might identify individual differences for weighing exploration against exploitation. And another question would be whether we can predict the switch between the two, so either between exploration and exploitation or the other way around. So we hypothesize here that variables of increasing boredom or decreasing attention can predict when an infant will no longer exploit a category, but switch to exploration. Then shortly to my experimental design. In our initial study, 10-month-old infants will be introduced to two novel stimulus categories, which are fribble species. Two identical houses will be presented on a computer screen, as you can see here on the right, and a new exemplar from either category will be revealed when the infant fixates on the corresponding house. Therefore, by looking, the infant can actively make choices. This design will enable us to distinguish between exploitation, in this case then consecutively triggering exemplars from the same category, and exploration, so switching from one category to the other or eventually fully disengaging. Currently, I'm awaiting the approval to start piloting and collecting data from an adapted online version with adults, where a new stimulus can be triggered via pressing the left or right arrow key. And we also want to test this version with primary school children to understand the developmental trajectory and to even see if there are comparabilities across age groups. Then we will measure across age groups the number, speed, and sequence of trigger events, as well as the switches between the categories. Shortly then, an outlook regarding my study plan. We are currently working on a new unifying theory about curious exploration, which we hope to develop and test throughout my PhD. And at least at first by utilizing this central study design that I just described. And then in supplementary experiments, we will investigate if and how contextual factors that should alter curious exploration and learning, namely preliminary uncertainty, prior knowledge, motivational costs, and lastly, with regards to older populations, task demands might influence the initially found exploratory patterns. A further goal is to design a physiological study in which we can test the interplay between boredom and decreasing learning progress and how it will predict switch events. Lastly, we will aim to test these findings in a computational model of an active, curious learner to hopefully find support for our new theory. So that's for me. Thank you very much, and I will try to answer any questions there might be.
Thank you for your presentation, Elena. And it sounds like a great research plan. Currently, we don't have questions asked, but we still have time, so feel free to ask your questions on the chat. In the meantime, I want to ask a couple of questions myself. So you mentioned that you also aim to test different age groups, like older children and adults as well. So I was wondering what kind of developmental trajectory do you expect from infancy to childhood and adulthood in terms of exploration or exploitation behavior? So how do you expect it to change, if you expect it to change?
That's a very good question. Thank you. I think infants are known to be quite broadly curious, because yeah, I think they also have to, right? While then earlier on during childhood, this curiosity kind of focuses and they become more specifically interested in exploiting what they're interested in already. So it could be that we find more switches in infants compared to children. Mm-hmm. I think that might be a possibility. I think also because sustained attention will probably increase over the ages. We'll have quite a lot of, well, not dropouts, but shorter exploratory runs and less engagement in infancy, of course, whereas children and adults will pull through the whole 30 trials that we offer them, basically. Yeah, with adults, we're not so sure. We will also include a question at the end, slightly describing or just roughly describing their strategy, whether they explored what they were interested in or followed specific patterns, something like 3 on the left, 3 on the right, or whether that changed over time, because we do expect that to change over time because it is relatively boring. So we do expect an effect of boredom to drop in at some point in all age groups. But how that might affect then the data, we will need to see.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And thank you for your response. We have another question for you. What do you think is the relationship between curiosity and sustained attention?
Very good question, especially with the first talk of today. I found that quite intriguing. I think sustained attention might be more or less effortful, depending on curiosity, maybe. So in our theory, we think about curiosity or curious exploration as something that happens because the individual can learn from this exploration or exploitation in that sense, so specific exploration, and they will disengage and look for something else if this learning isn't big enough anymore, isn't rewarding in itself anymore to that individual. So maybe curiosity can help lower this threshold, basically, that engaging with something, so having sustained attention towards a specific category or towards a specific toy, might be more rewarding for longer or less effortful, so they engage longer, have longer sustained attention. However, that would only be to a certain degree, maybe, as Kimberly also pointed out, the research that said that these long lookers actually had slower mental processes and had more difficulties later on. So I think there might be then a balance between where sustained attention is good, is enhanced through curiosity because you engage with something you're curious about, but then also not too long, that your learning is actually effective. So that would be then saying there needs to be a switch at some point for learning to be effective and efficient. I hope that answers the question somewhat.
Thank you very much for your answer. I wanted to ask one other question that I thought might be relevant. So you are also aiming to look at the individual differences in exploration and exploitation behavior, right? And I was wondering what type of other like psychological constructs might interact with this curiosity or exploratory behavior. For instance, would you expect an effect of like temperament, or what kind of things might be influencing this behavior early in infancy?
Very good question. And I think the research is not very clear on this yet at all, because there are probably so many things that might affect it while also being interdependent themselves. So I think a new perspective that I'm trying to bring into this is boredom. I think kind of maybe individual differences in how soon you're bored by something might be quite interesting to look at, and might answer this exploration-exploitation dilemma, because it has been shown, at least in computational models for adults and more complex study designs, to be quite informative. Yeah, definitely temperament plays into that. I think the problem is that we don't really know what curiosity is at this point. A very straightforward definition does not exist. So I think it taps into a lot of behaviors, and a lot of different constructs are kind of associated with it while not being necessarily distinct. So yeah, definitely temperament, executive functions, also just the situation, prior knowledge, as I said, a lot of things probably.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It really sounds like a very exciting research program, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it develops. And if we have any more questions, feel free to post it in the chat. If not, you can still post it, and I'm sure Elena will get back to those. I think we will be continuing with Heather's talk if we don't have any more questions left. Okay, thanks Elena for your great talk.
Thank you.
All right, thank you Elena very much. Yeah, so we have Heather here, last but not least, who will talk about moral judgments in children and adults. So when you are ready to share your slides, you are ready to go or fine to go?